Hi, and welcome to this video on Concept 17. It's the last concept in Unit 2, and we're going to be talking about real-world situations when we can write and solve inequalities, or even literal inequalities at times, to represent real-world situations. With all word problems, we want to use our word problem strategy, cubes, annotating, to break down the word problems. We have a little hashtag, life is a word problem. So these are some of the most important problems to be able to solve, because in life, no one's going to present you with an inequality written out using algebra and say, oh, you can solve this to figure out how to make your business grow. But you will be able to break down real-world situations and create inequalities that help you understand the world if you can do this topic. So, for example, Ronald decides to start his own burger restaurant. He wants to make at least $500 every day. All right, here we go. He wants to make at least $500 every day. To do so, he sells his burgers for more than the total cost of the ingredients plus other costs. It costs Ronald $2.25 per burger in addition to a daily cost of $200 for labor. Ronald wants to charge customers $3.50 per burger. How many burgers does he need to sell in order to meet his financial goal? So a lot of things going on in this question, so it's important to use cubes to break it down to make sure we understand. C in cube says to circle the quantities, so I see 500, 350, 225, and 200. Take a minute now and box any math action words you see that may be important. I'm going to box at least 500. I'm going to box in per burger. And that comes up again here, per burger. There may be other math action words you have boxed, and that's okay. These are the most important ones that I've pulled out. Take a moment, pause, and underline the question. The question says, how many burgers does he need to sell in order to meet his financial goal? So I'm going to double underline burgers because that's what they really want to know. We don't know how many burgers he needs to sell, but we want to find out an answer that will be some number of burgers. Now, in math, when we don't know what something is, we use a variable to represent it. I would say that b would usually be a good variable, but sometimes my b's can look like a 6. So I'm going to use that classic variable x to represent burgers, or specifically the number of burgers sold. So this is my key so that I know what I'm using my variable to represent. And remember, I chose it because they asked about burgers in the question. Burgers are our unknown or changing quantity. So where I see burger in the problem, I might want to keep that in mind with this is going to be x. Now I'm going to go back. I've used the C, I've used the B, underline, I've used the B for boxing. I want to expand on what we know before we get to solve. So expanding on what we know that at least is one of our inequality keywords. Which inequality do we think of when we hear at least? We should think of greater than or equal to. So we know that what Ronald makes, in other words, his profit, what he makes, should be greater than or equal to $500 for each day. Now, your profit, or profit in general, is comprised of two things. It's like the money you make, money made, minus the money that you spend. Right? In other words, the more advanced vocabulary would be your income minus your expenses. And in Ronald's case, he wants to make sure that whatever that is going to be greater than or equal to the $500 that is his goal each day. Now, it costs Ronald $2.25 per burger. So that is something that costs Ronald. Maybe this is a word that we should have boxed. So costs are things that make us lose money. These are money that we spent, or in other words, expenses. So that's going to be a negative for him in the expenses. So one of his expenses is $2.25 per burger. Per can mean division at times, but in this situation, we can say it's $2.25 times the number of burgers he spends. For a quick example, right? If he makes one burger, it's going to cost $2.25. If he makes two burgers, his cost is going to be 2 times that, or $4.50. If he makes 3 burgers, it'll be 3 times that, or $6.75. When I'm at the bottom of the screen, sometimes it jumps. But that should say 75 right there. Okay? $6.75 if you sell 3 burgers. Notice that each time we're multiplying the amount it costs per burger to find that expense. So this is one of Ronald's expenses. He's losing $2.25 per burger. In addition, the daily cost, again, another cost word, which means something he's spending or an expense for Ronald, of $200 for labor. That means altogether he's spending $200 for the people who maybe work for him each day. Labor is like people who work. So these two things, the cost per burger and the daily cost of labor, are part of his expenses. Now, of course, this is a business. He's hoping to make money, so he also has some income as well. He wants to charge customers $3.50 per burger. How can we write an expression for $3.50 per burger? Again, because we have that action word per, which tells us to multiply, it's going to be $3.50 x. And I just realized that over here, I did what I said I wasn't going to do, which is I used b instead of x. So let me go back and fix that, because I did clearly state in the key that x should be burgers. If you used b for burgers on your paper, that's totally fine. And I'm going to bring this down. So, we now have an inequality that uses all of the pieces of information to help us learn how many burgers he needs to sell to meet his financial goal. This is the new part. Making this inequality is what was different from all the other lessons we've seen so far. So please make sure you understand how we went from the words here to this inequality. And maybe a good way to do that is to summarize right now what the pieces of this inequality mean. 350x represents what for Ronald? 350x represents the cost per burger that he will charge. This is money that he is going to make. Minus 225x, what does that represent for Ronald? 225 per burger is what negative 2.25x represents in our inequality. This is one of the costs that Ronald has in his business. What does the minus 200 represent? That represents the daily cost of labor. And what does this 500 represent? 500 represents the money he wants to make each day. He wants to make at least this amount, so we use the inequality greater than or equal to. For example, Ronald would be happy with making 700 a day because 700 is greater than or equal to 500. Let's clear out our workspace a little bit. And now that we understand the inequality that we've created, we're going to solve it and use it to answer Ronald's question, how many burgers he needs to sell. I've rewritten that inequality on the next page to give us some more workspace. In this inequality, I'm going to show that there's two sides of the inequality, right, to split in half by that inequality sign. On the left side, I notice there are like terms, 350x and negative 225x. We consider these like terms because they have the same variables and the same exponents. And we can combine those. If you need to use a calculator to check, you can, but we're going to subtract 350 minus 225, and that gives us 125, and we keep the variables the same. 200 has no other like terms, so we just bring it down, and we bring everything else down as well. At this point, we have an inequality with a constant and a coefficient. What is the constant in this inequality? Negative 200 is the constant. It's being subtracted. So to eliminate it, we add 200 to each side. These cancel out because they're additive inverses. And we're left with 125x is greater than or equal to 700. The inequality did not have to flip because we did not divide or multiply by a negative. Let's think about what this inequality represents right now. 350 was what Ronald wants to sell his burgers for, but he has to pay $2.25 for each burger he makes. So that means he has a $1.25 profit per burger. He also has a cost of $200 a day for labor, which if he needs to include that to his goal, he needs to make at least $700 to offset that cost of labor, with the profit of $1.25 per burger. So if we're going to find out how many burgers he needs to sell, we need to divide 125 on both sides. We're eliminating the coefficient. This is definitely something we expect you to use your calculators for. You can type in 700 divided by 1.25. On the left side, these are going to cancel out or give us 1 because we're dividing something by itself. We do not have to flip the inequality because we did not divide by a negative. And on the right side, 700 divided by 1.25 is 560. So the solution to the inequality is all x such that x is greater than or equal to 560. But that doesn't answer Ronald's question. Let's go back to the question, how many burgers does he need to sell to meet his financial goal? It'd be easy to say 560, but remember this was at least 500 a day, and it didn't say that x equals in our solution, x is greater than or equal to 560. So we can say 560 burgers or more. We could also write at least 560 burgers because these will all give us at least that $500 profit. Let's try and check our solution using that situation. So I'm going to a new page. Remember our original inequality said that $3.50 per burger minus $2.25 the cost for burger minus $200 for labor, and we are hoping to make at least $500. If Ronald sells 560 burgers in our check, we're going to replace x with 560 everywhere that it's in the equation. And I'm bringing everything else down the way it was. So 350 times 560 minus 225 times 560 minus 200 is greater than or equal to 500. You can type this entire thing into your calculator just the way it is to check. And I'm going to do that right now. And if you typed it in correctly, you should get that this whole thing is equal to 500. Is 500 greater than or equal to 500? Yes. So this value, does satisfy this inequality, which means that 560 burgers would be a totally valid number of burgers to sell in order to meet Ronald's financial goal. What if we chose a different number? What if we said maybe 600? Notice I'm choosing something that's greater than 560 because our answer said x is greater than 560 or equal to it. And certainly 600 is greater than 560. Here's what that check would look like, and since I chose 600, I'm going to replace x with 600 everywhere that it was in the inequality, and I'm going back to my calculator and typing in this entire thing, and as long as you type it in correctly, we're going to get 550, and we're asking ourselves, is 550 greater than 500? Yes. So 600 is another valid solution. So for Ronald, if he sells 560 burgers or more, he will meet his financial goal. So this was one example of a real-world situation. We spent a lot of time on it because it was the first one that we're seeing. These will get easier and faster as you notice certain patterns. A big thing to look out for is this word per, and things like cost or charge, which again told us that this was something that he's going to make when he's selling his burgers. If you have any questions, please write them down. If there's something you don't understand, you can feel free to rewind and rewatch that section. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you and doing more practice on this type of problem tomorrow in class.